Scrum Masters Elite _UK, in-depth, straight-talk rugby analysis. Subscribe so you don't miss out.
The 39 points conceded before England's defensive system had even woken up were not merely a tactical issue. Personally, I see it as a sign of structural confusion, of personnel decisions lacking sufficient depth, and of a cycle of mistakes repeating itself in the most literal sense of the word cycle. Last week at Murrayfield, against the Scotland national rugby union team, everything collapsed within the first 15 minutes. 17 points came too quickly, too easily. The missed tackles were not accidents. They allowed Hugh Jones and Jamie Ritchie to score through almost the same defensive gap, something that hurt not only because of the scoreboard, but because of the nagging feeling that we had seen this before. Then Kyle Steyn cut through as many as 10 defenders, an image that forces any rugby lover to ask, was it a moment of individual brilliance, or evidence of a disorganized defensive system? Just a week later at Twickenham, the Ireland national rugby union team repeated the script with even greater ruthlessness. 22-0 in under 20 minutes. The narrow channels were exploited with such precision that it felt as if the opposition had been handed a detailed blueprint of England's weaknesses. And perhaps they had, through video, analysis, and the glaring repetition of the same structural flaws.
I do not believe this is simply a matter of mentality. Nor is it about one or two individuals making mistakes. When two different opponents exploit the same fragile structure, in nearly identical fashion, the problem lies in the architecture of the system. At this point, the name that must be mentioned is Steve Borthwick. I hold no prejudice against him. Borthwick built a solid foundation at club level. But at international level, particularly in a tournament as unforgiving as the Six Nations Championship, every personnel decision is tested immediately. The decision to entrust defensive coordination to Richard Wigglesworth troubles me the most. Wigglesworth was an outstanding scrum half in his playing days, intelligent, composed, an excellent reader of the game. But test-level defense requires more than general rugby understanding. It demands deep specialization, akin to neurosurgery, as the earlier metaphor suggested. 5 months in the role, within the crucible of the Six Nations, is simply too little time to apprentice in a position that normally requires years of accumulation.
The result is a defensive system resembling a building still under construction in the middle of a storm. Meanwhile, Byron McGuigan has been tasked with overseeing the back three in aerial play, a narrower but clearly defined responsibility. Within that scope, he has performed competently. But when the foundation collapses in the central channels and tight edges, an intact roof offers little comfort. The reshuffling of roles involving Joe Labd, and especially the void left after Felix Jones departed, is, in my view, the most critical link in this entire story. Jones once brought a defensive structure that was clear, principle-driven, and trigger-based. When he left without an equivalent replacement, the system did not immediately implode, but it gradually lost direction. Now, it is being exposed by teams that know exactly how to target it. What pains me most is this detail. In 3 separate situations against Ireland, 2 English defenders rushed toward the same primary ball carrier, leaving the passing lane behind them exposed.
This is not an isolated technical error. It is a communication breakdown, a role definition failure, a misunderstanding of the system. It suggests the players do not share a common defensive language. When players ask for extra training sessions to correct mistakes, it shows awareness. But if the overarching architecture is flawed, more repetition merely reinforces temporary fixes. I draw an important lesson from this: competence in one domain does not automatically translate to another simply because of familiarity, loyalty, or goodwill. In high-performance environments especially, appointments based on trusted circles may bring cohesion, but they cannot replace specialized expertise. I also learned that honesty with reality is non-negotiable. When 2 consecutive matches expose the same weakness, it cannot be dismissed as a bad day at the office. It is a pattern, and patterns end only when leadership confronts them directly. Frustration is natural. But rather than directing anger solely at the players, we must recognize that they are executors.
They operate within the framework built for them. If that framework lacks solidity, weaknesses will surface no matter how hard they fight. This is not to absolve individual responsibility. But in modern rugby, defense is a collective art. One mistimed link can break the entire chain. I believe that crisis, if acknowledged properly, can become an opportunity for reconstruction. The truth may be harsh, but it must be spoken, not to attack individuals, but to emphasize that at international level, precision in coaching is as vital as fitness and talent. What lingers for me is not anger, but regret, because England possessed the personnel to perform far better. Yet talent truly flourishes only when placed within the right structure. The question, who is coaching this team, is not meant to belittle anyone. It is a reminder that responsibility begins at the top. And if this cycle is to end, it must begin with adjustments in leadership thinking, in role allocation, and in the recognition that test-level defense is not a place for experimentation.
Scrum Masters Elite _UK concludes, if you want to change the cycle, start with structure and leadership.